Okay, let's start with research. And I've been involved, in addition to INPIA, with some other networks that were looking at these issues. There was a network in Germany that we met for 2 years, and we thought to put it forward, but it didn't move forward, but at least we were debating on this for 2 years. And we think one of the key issues is we don't have really a solid theoretical basis in elder abuse. We look at child abuse, women's abuse, etc. But okay, we can learn from them, but I think the field has developed so far more theoretical. And as a result, our methodologies are many times not really comparable. And this is why, like, we found a high rate. They found in England the same shortly afterwards a smaller rate, and I talked to the people in England, and we saw what the differences are, because in order to create a uniform instrument, you need a theoretical, conceptual basis at least, which would be acceptable, let's say, to the developed country. I'm not talking already, this is another issue that I want to touch on, but at least for the developed countries. And we talked about it in Canada. Yes. And we are trying to work in this direction. But this is still very important for us to move forward, because this will advance the field, I think, quite very much. Now, regarding policy, so I think elder abuse is now very much tied, and it should be, to the issue of human rights and protection of older people. And I think in many of the organizations I'm involved in, including in PEA, we try to push the Convention for Human Rights, even though it's the countries who have to do it, but still, as an international organization, we can contribute. I'm glad that this conference also put it as a major issue on the agenda, but so I think in policy, and you can give it different angles, but from my experience in Israel, if you add legislation, it has to be connected to resources. It's not enough to have a law, but if you want to implement it, you need to have resources to implement the law. So in some laws, I know we were successful in Israel, not necessarily in elder abuse. Okay? And I guess we are more advanced than some other countries, so I don't know if there are specific laws in other countries. There are some. I know international WHO had this report that I was part of it as well, that was just published, looking at the issue in several countries. And I think that's one of the topics that was on the agenda. So policy and legislation, you can't really divorce them. They have to go hand in hand. And if you have legislation, it's easier to develop services. Now, so you need to think more innovative, but you need also, like we have these special units, but you need to train manpower. Because elder abuse still, even in my university, I must admit, is not the top priority on the agenda of teaching. Okay? In Israel, for example, there are 2 universities who have a master's program. We have a master's department in gerontology that I created already 13 years ago, and we have now also a PhD program. And there were some master and doctoral theses on the topic. But if I look at the program of teaching, it's not a priority. So you need also education and training in order to have, the right manpower for this issue, and I know we are trying to push it on different levels. Another way regarding practice is that you need, at least in Israel, and the system is different in other countries, much more coordination and collaboration between, let's say, welfare and health. And we are trying through this, for example, interministerial committee and on a local level as well, because we have local associations for the aged where all bodies are sitting together. So you need more coordination, and you have to involve much more both the legal system, the police, and the judiciary. Because I know there was a case in Haifa, unfortunately I wouldn't delve into details if we have time maybe later, but that everybody was involved. And the case was brought to court, but the judge had to dismiss it because the older woman didn't want to admit, she was afraid. And eventually the son who was the abusive took her to Germany and she died 2 weeks afterwards. That's what we heard. So here is the case where everybody was involved, but still not enough. But this was a judge who had a special understanding. But there are some judges, at least in Israel, that not necessarily. So you have to expose the judiciary as well, not only the legal system and the police, of course.